Frida Kahlo died on July 13, 1954, but the truth about her final days was buried with her. No autopsy was ever performed. Her nurse found 11 empty pill bottles by her bed when only 7 were prescribed. Just days before, she had given Diego their anniversary ring a month early, telling him she felt she was leaving soon. Her last diary entry read, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." The official cause was pulmonary embolism, but hospital records tell a different story. What really happened in that blue house will shock you. Frida Kahlo used to tell people she was born in 1910, but the truth was, she came into the world in 1907. She lied about her birth year so she could say she was born with the revolution. She wanted people to think her life started the same year Mexico began to change forever. Her real father's name wasn't even Guillermo. It was Karl Wilhelm Kahlo, and he had escaped Germany in 1891 after hurting his head so badly that it gave him seizures and memory problems for the rest of his life. He left his first wife and children behind, came to Mexico with nothing, and changed everything about himself. He became Guillermo and started working as a photographer for the government. Her mother, Matilde, came from a strict Catholic family in Oaxaca. But before marrying Guillermo, she had an affair with her own brother-in-law. Life in the Kahlo house was full of secrets, pain, and money problems. Sometimes Guillermo didn't have enough money to buy supplies for his photos, so he'd offer to take someone's picture in exchange for food. Later, Frida found out her father had Jewish roots and had escaped anti-Semitic violence back in Europe. Knowing this, mixed with being Mexican and raised Catholic, gave Frida a strange and complex view of herself. That mix of cultures and buried truths would later show up in everything she painted. Their house, La Casa Azul, looked bright on the outside, but inside it was heavy with sickness and fear. Her father's seizures were terrifying. He could collapse without warning, even in front of rich clients. Frida, as a child, had to carry emergency medicine and keep an eye on him every second. The walls of the house were painted cobalt blue, not just because it looked nice, but because Guillermo believed the color helped calm him down, and it helped hide the blood when he hit the floor. In the back of the house was a dark room where he worked on gruesome medical photos for extra cash. He took pictures of dead bodies and surgeries, and Frida saw them all. By the time she was 8, she could spot the signs of an oncoming seizure and knew how to move her father's body so he wouldn't choke or break something. That early training around pain and death made her numb to suffering long before her own pain began. The family had lost not just one child, but 2 sons, both dead before their first birthdays. Matilda never recovered. She stopped believing her arms were safe. When Frida was born, Matilda didn't hold her for weeks, convinced that her touch could kill. Her father didn't believe in God, which made things worse. He ate meat during Lent and skipped Mass on purpose, just to annoy Matilda. Their fights were loud, sometimes public. They barely had enough money. Guillermo made only 25 pesos a month, when most families needed at least 100 to survive. Matilda secretly sold her jewelry and even washed clothes for other people, but she never told the children. They sent the other daughters to convent school, but not Frida. They couldn't afford the fees, so she stayed home and became the one who handled the money and her father's health. By age 10, she wasn't a child anymore. At 6 years old, Frida got polio. It shrunk her right leg by 2 centimeters and left it thinner than the other. Kids laughed at her and called her Frida the Lame and Wooden Leg. She wore thick stockings to hide it. She was trapped in bed for 9 months, stuck in a small room while her sisters played outside. She talked to an imaginary friend who lived behind the mirror. Her parents thought she was going mad. Her father understood. He gave her a paint box and told her to draw what she saw in her head. The polio also twisted her spine so badly that later doctors said it was bent 17 degrees to the right, but they brushed off her pain as female hysteria. At school, kids bullied her, hid her books, laughed at her limp. From this, she grew tough. She stopped caring what others thought and started building her own way of being. In 1922, Frida entered the National Preparatory School, one of only 35 girls among 2,000 boys. Her father gave up 3 months of wages to get her in. He hoped she could support herself one day because he knew marriage might never happen with her leg and her limp. The school was chaotic. Students fought the police, and Frida watched one of them get shot and carried past her classroom, bleeding. She joined a rebellious student group called Los Cachuchas. They wore little hats and pulled crazy stunts on teachers. They handed out banned communist writings and argued about politics. Her first real boyfriend, Alejandro Gomez Arias, was part of the group. He gave her books by Marx and talked about changing the world. In 1923, during a Catholic uprising, militants stormed the school. Students like Frida had to lock the doors and defend themselves. She learned to make Molotov cocktails and fight back. She hated religion after that and leaned hard into her revolutionary beliefs. Then came the accident. On September 17, 1925, Frida was 18. She got on a bus with Alejandro. It was a normal afternoon, and she almost took an earlier bus, but had forgotten her umbrella. That one choice changed her life. A streetcar smashed into the side of the wooden bus. People were killed on the spot. Alejandro later said, "A piece of iron went into Frida from one side and came out through the vagina. A metal handrail had pierced through her body. Alejandro pulled it out as she screamed. She spent a month in the hospital, then 2 more in bed, broken in more ways than anyone could count. Her spine was fractured in 3 places. Her pelvis was broken in 3 parts. Her leg had 11 fractures. Her foot was crushed. Her ribs were broken. Her collarbone shattered. Her shoulder dislocated. And worst of all, the handrail destroyed her uterus. She could never have children. Doctors thought she would die, but she didn't. She lay in bed, wrapped in a full-body cast. Her mother placed a mirror above the bed so she could see herself. Her father rigged up an easel so she could paint while lying flat. And that's how it all started. "I never thought of painting until 1926, she later wrote. But now she painted herself because that's what she saw all day long. She painted her pain and her face and her fears. Even photographer Nicholas Murray came to capture her painting in bed. That bed became her studio, her world, and the place she created her most powerful work. She would go on to have more than 30 surgeries on her spine. Some helped, some made things worse. She started drinking every day and got addicted to morphine and barbiturates. In 1946, after a failed spinal fusion in New York, she turned to more drugs just to stay ahead of the pain. By 1953, her right foot turned black with gangrene. They amputated her leg below the knee. The night she died on July 13, 1954, she took 11 painkillers even though the limit was 7. No one did an autopsy. Officially, it was a pulmonary embolism, but many believe it was an overdose. Her last diary entry read, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." Before all that, when she was just 21, she walked right up to the famous Diego Rivera while he was painting a mural. She didn't ask politely. She told him to look at her paintings. He was 42, twice her age, still married, and known for chasing women. But her paintings stunned him. He said they had true severity, and plastic honesty. She wore traditional dresses from the Tehuana people, huge skirts, bold jewelry, and braided hair. It was more than a fashion choice. It was a political message. She didn't want to dress like the European upper class. She dressed like the indigenous women who held power in their communities. It shocked Mexico's elite. Her early paintings were influenced by European styles. She mimicked Botticelli and Modigliani. But after meeting Rivera, she changed everything. Her art became Mexican, filled with folk symbols, Aztec references, and pre-Columbian images. She wasn't just painting anymore. She was building a new language, one born from pain and heritage. In 1929, she got her first big exhibition and her first paid commissions. But the truth behind those paintings was darker than anyone guessed. She used surreal imagery to express her trauma without showing it directly. Her broken spine, her shattered leg, her destroyed pelvis, all hidden in dreamlike paintings that looked pretty but carried screams. That same year, she married Diego, August 21st, 1929. Her mother called it a marriage between an elephant and a dove. Frida was 5'3". Diego weighed over 300 pounds. The wedding was a mess. Diego got drunk, fired his gun, smashed gifts, and broke someone's finger in a fight. Frida refused to move in with him right away. Her father had warned him, "My daughter is sick, and always will be. She's a devil." Rivera said, "I know." The press couldn't stop talking about them. They were no longer just Diego and Frida. They became a legend. Frida Kahlo was just 24 years old when something inside her broke forever. On July 4th, 1932, while staying in Detroit, she lost her baby at exactly 3.5 months pregnant. She was bleeding badly at Henry Ford Hospital while Diego Rivera, her husband, was busy painting murals for Edsel Ford. Their friend Lucienne Bloch saw the entire thing unfold and later wrote how Frida was taken away in a pool of blood, crying and in agony. She said huge blood clots kept falling out of her. What came out wasn't even a formed baby. It was just broken tissue. Frida stayed in the hospital until July 17th. She asked the doctors if she could see her fetus so she could paint it, but they said no. So Diego brought her medical textbooks instead. Out of this pain came her painting Henry Ford Hospital, where she showed herself naked on a floating bed, bleeding and connected to 6 strange objects by red ribbons. One of them was a male fetus with see-through eyelids. It looked around 33 weeks old, even though the miscarriage happened much earlier. It was the first time she painted on metal. 2 years before that, in November 1930, Frida had gone to San Francisco with Diego. It was her first time leaving Mexico. She was only 23 and had only been painting for 5 years. But nobody seemed to care about her. People in San Francisco only talked about Diego, and the newspapers treated her like just the wife of a famous Mexican artist. They focused more on Diego's politics than his art. Frida wrote to her family that people wouldn't even let Diego use the bathroom in peace. Feeling invisible, she painted Frida and Diego Rivera to express how she really felt. Diego looked bigger in the painting, almost like he was the main figure. Frida stood beside him, small but staring right at the viewer. It was her way of showing strength, even though the world didn't see it yet. Then, in 1932, right after another miscarriage, Frida painted something that shocked everyone. It was called My Birth. The painting shows a woman giving birth to Frida herself. You can see Frida's head with her famous eyebrows coming out from between the legs, but the mother's face is covered by a white sheet, like she's already dead. The bed is soaked in blood. The baby's head looks huge, too big, and too old for a newborn. Above the scene hangs a painting of the Virgin of Sorrows, her chest pierced by 2 daggers. At the bottom of Frida's painting, there's a blank scroll. Usually, these scrolls were used to thank saints for miracles. But Frida left it empty. She said there were no miracles in her life that year. In 1938, Frida finally got her own solo show at Julian Levy Gallery in New York. That same year, something tragic happened. On October 21st at 6 a.m., actress Dorothy Hale jumped to her death from her apartment window. Just 12 days later, Frida met Claire Booth Luce, who had been close friends with Dorothy. Luce asked Frida to paint a memorial. But instead of a gentle portrait, Frida painted the entire suicide. Dorothy standing on the balcony, falling through the air, and lying broken and bloody on the ground. Blood-red words told the story across the painting. When Luce saw it, she was horrified and even got sick. She asked, "What am I supposed to do with this bloody painting of my dead friend?" At first, she wanted to destroy it. Back in 1934, things got even darker. Frida found out Diego had been cheating on her with her own sister, Christina. She felt betrayed by the 2 people she loved most. That same year, she had another miscarriage, lost 5 toes from her right foot, and needed her appendix removed. So she started her own affairs. One of the most intense was with Isamu Noguchi, a Japanese-American sculptor. Their secret romance lasted 8 months. He helped her feel beautiful again. But the secret got out when furniture for their private hideaway got delivered to Diego by mistake. In another version of the story, Diego stormed into the hospital where Frida and Noguchi were and threatened him with a gun. Diego didn't mind her relationships with women. He even said women could give each other better pleasure. But he couldn't tolerate other men. In that same year, 1938, actor Edward G. Robinson walked into her studio and bought 4 paintings for $800. That was a huge amount at the time, worth around $17,000 today. It was her first big sale. But when André Breton, the surrealist leader, came to Mexico and tried to label her art as surreal, Frida refused. She said, "I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality." Her art wasn't fantasy. It was pain. Real pain. Her injuries from the bus crash, her spine surgeries, her losses, everything was real. In 1939, Frida was invited to show her work in Paris. But when she arrived, nothing was ready. Breton hadn't even secured the gallery space. She called the whole thing a colossal pile of shit in her letters to Diego. But despite the chaos, the show was a success. The Louvre bought her painting, The Frame. She became the first Mexican artist ever collected by the Louvre. Even Diego hadn't achieved that. In that painting, she surrounded her face with bright Mexican tin decorations and wore ancient jewelry. It was her way of showing who she really was to Europe. That same year, when her marriage with Diego fell apart, Frida painted her most famous piece, The Two Fridas. It showed 2 versions of herself sitting side by side. One wore a traditional Mexican dress, the Frida Diego had loved. The other wore a European-style dress, the one he rejected. Both hearts were exposed. The Mexican Frida held a tiny portrait of Diego, and her heart was strong. The European Frida was bleeding, with surgical tools failing to stop the flow. The artery between them looked like the last thread holding her together. She worked on this painting for over 200 hours. Every part of it came from real surgeries she had witnessed on her own body. She sold it for 4,000 pesos to help pay for her divorce. After they remarried in December 1940, Frida began teaching at La Esmeralda. In 1943, she earned 1,000 pesos a month, which would be about $4,500 today. But she didn't teach like others. She took students to markets and hospitals, telling them, "Paint what you see, not what I say." Her most loyal students were called Los Fridos. When she became too sick to leave the house, 4 of them came to Casa Azul 3 times a week to learn from her bed. She didn't sugarcoat anything. Once, she told a student his painting was shit with pretty colors, but they loved her for her honesty. In 1942, while she was forced to wear a steel corset and spent most days in bed, she painted The Broken Column. Her torso is split open, showing a crumbling pillar in place of her spine. Dozens of nails pierce her skin. Each one stands for a real pain she lived with every day. There's a single tear on her face. Despite everything, she held herself with dignity. The painting took her 6 months and about 150 hours to finish. It sold for 6,000 pesos in 1947 and is now worth over $15 million. Back in 1937, Frida had a secret affair with Leon Trotsky. He was 57 and living at her home after being exiled. She was 29. Their romance lasted about 4 months. She wrote him love notes and signed them, "Your girl, Frida." She even painted a portrait for him, holding flowers and a letter. But when Diego found out, he exploded with rage. Trotsky later broke it off, afraid it would ruin him politically. Frida later called him a boring old man. After Trotsky was murdered in 1940 by a Stalinist agent, Frida and Diego returned to the Communist Party and began supporting Stalin. Frida even painted over Trotsky's image in some of her old works. In one 1948 painting, she showed herself being healed by Karl Marx while crushing American eagles under her feet. Communist records showed she donated 5,000 pesos to Soviet causes. In her diary, she wrote, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." In 1943, while World War II was spreading terror, she painted "Thinking About Death." There was a skull on her forehead, surrounded by thorny plants. She said those thorns stood for the Nazi threat coming to Mexico. She had been getting death threats, too. Medical records from 1943 said she was on 28 different medications, including morphine and Demerol. She said the skulls in her paintings came from her hallucinations. She wrote, "Death dances around my bed every night. I paint her to make friends." From 1931 to 1941, Frida had an on-and-off love affair with photographer Nicolas Murray. He took over 200 photos of her, some of them nude, which weren't seen until 1995. In 37 letters, she described her relationships with women like Chavela Vargas and Dolores del Rio. Murray's color portraits of her, some now worth $850,000 each, showed her in men's clothes, smoking cigars. Hotel receipts showed they checked into New York hotels 23 times under fake names. Chavela later confirmed their 2-year romance and called Frida the love of her life. After a brutal spinal fusion surgery in 1946, where doctors removed 4 vertebrae and inserted a 28-inch steel rod, Frida painted "Tree of Hope, Stand Fast." She showed herself lying on a table, bloody and scarred, while a stronger version of herself sat nearby holding a corset. She even used her own blood in the painting. She said it helped her paint "The truth of my broken body." That surgery failed. She had 6 more operations before she died in 1954. In 1935, Frida saw a news story about a man who stabbed his girlfriend 20 times. He told the judge, "It was just a few small nips." Frida turned that horror into a painting. She kept adding blood to it for 13 years. She even stabbed the frame with a real knife. She placed a caged bird in the corner, its door open, but not enough to escape. She said, "In Mexico, killing is very attractive and natural." In 1953, she had her first solo show in Mexico. Doctors said she was too sick to go, so she ordered an ambulance and had her entire bed moved to the gallery. Guests were stunned when she arrived on a stretcher and directed the whole event while lying in her bed. She stayed like that the entire time. It was part art, part defiance, and fully unforgettable. One of her last paintings, made in 1954, was called "Marxism Will Give Health to the Sick." It showed Frida standing with crutches thrown away, being healed by giant hands. Karl Marx floated above her like a protective spirit. She held a red book in one hand. She once said, "For the first time, I am not crying anymore." Even as her body failed, she kept teaching. After 1944, she couldn't make it to her school anymore, so she brought students to Casa Azul. Only 4 stayed loyal. She got them mural jobs around town. Even when her body was breaking, she still shared everything she had. Her painting, "The Wounded Deer," finished in 1946, showed her head on a deer pierced by 9 arrows. She gave it as a wedding gift. It was tragic and beautiful. She used her pet deer, Granizzo, as the model, and believed that pain was her destiny. The painting didn't sell well back then, but today it's seen as one of her most powerful works. In 1950, Frida Kahlo was trapped in a hospital bed for 9 long months. She went through 7 painful spine surgeries. Her body grew weaker every day. She lost 45 pounds and had to be fed through tubes. Nurses gave her over 50 morphine shots just to ease the pain. During this time, her screams echoed through the hospital. They had to strap her to the bed to keep her still, and she painted using a mirror system and a special easel. Her diary said she thought about ending her life 23 times. She even wrote out plans using her paintbrushes and her pills. One of her earlier paintings, called "Without Hope," showed her being force-fed while looking helpless. Floating in the painting were dead animals and organs. She once wrote, "Not the least hope remains to me." Those words stuck with her through every moment of pain. Then came 1953. On August 11th, doctors had to cut off her right leg because of gangrene. It was the only way to save her. She didn't just get a fake leg, she turned it into art. She had red leather boots made, decorated with tiny bells and Zapotec embroidery. She designed 3 prosthetic legs. One had a holder for her painting tools. One was fancy, made for public events. One was soft for when she stayed in bed. Her diary showed 47 drawings of severed legs and feet. One page had a sketch of her missing limb with the words, "Legs, what do I need them for when I have wings to fly?" The pain didn't stop. Her phantom limb pain reached 9 out of 10 every single day. The fittings for her prosthetic took up to 6 hours because of her fragile spine. She kept painting through it all, even when the drugs barely worked. In 1954, she finished a painting with Stalin in the background. She worked on it for 127 hours across 4 months. Her hands had become shaky from heavy drug use. She was getting 12 morphine shots a day, with each shot being 15 milligrams, 3 times the safe amount. Her blood morphine levels reached 2.3 milligrams per liter, which could have killed her. On top of that, she was taking 45 Demerol tablets a week and drinking alcohol. She painted while half-conscious, and you could see the shaky brush strokes in her final work. On February 3, 1954, she overdosed. Diego found her passed out, with her paintbrush still wet. That year alone, doctors had to intervene 23 times for drug-related emergencies. Her dealer said she was spending $890 a month on medication, which would be over $9,000 today. She refused rehab. She said, "Pain and drugs are my only honest friends." Her body was slowly shutting down, but she didn't stop creating. Frida owned 28 different corsets. Some were made of leather, others of metal or plaster. One from 1944 weighed 8 pounds. It was covered in hand-painted hearts and communist symbols. She called them "my white coffins." She wore them 22 hours a day. Her 1943 corset had 14 metal rods that pressed against her spine, leaving sores that got infected 6 times. One corset had secret pockets to hide morphine and brushes. They crushed her lungs so badly that she could only breathe at 60% normal. Her diary had 89 corset sketches. Altogether, she wore these corsets for 8,160 days. Her final one in 1954 used Velcro to make it easier for her to put on during her weakest days. That same year, her lungs were working at only 35%. She had bronchopneumonia, a high fever, and was barely 82 pounds. But in June 1954, she painted bright red watermelons with the words "Viva la Vida" and her name. Just 8 days later, she was gone. She painted for only 23 minutes a day and had to stop every few strokes to use an oxygen tank. Under ultraviolet light, tiny skulls were found inside the watermelon seeds. Her final diary line said, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." That painting sold for $5,000 in 1955. Today, it's worth over $15 million. On July 2, 1954, she showed up to a protest in Mexico City, just 11 days before her death. She had pneumonia. Doctors begged her to stay home, but she let Diego push her in a wheelchair through the crowd. She held up a sign with a dove and the words, "Por la paz." Her fist was raised. Her eyes were filled with fire. Her head was wrapped in a scarf. That protest was against the CIA-backed coup in Guatemala. Even when her body was falling apart, she kept fighting for what she believed in. Frida had been part of the Mexican Communist Party since 1927. She was kicked out in 1949 because of her affair with Trotsky. After he was killed with an ice pick in 1940, she turned on him. She called him a coward and claimed he stole from her. She painted him out of old works and started praising Stalin instead. Her diary had scribbles like "Viva Stalin" and drawings of him with hearts. She never stopped believing in her political causes, no matter how messy they got. One of her most disturbing paintings came in 1933. It was called "My Dress Hangs There." She painted it while staying in New York. Her empty dress floated over scenes of poverty and chaos. A church had a giant dollar sign on it. Smoke poured from factory chimneys. Mae West's face was next to a burning building. The Statue of Liberty looked like a joke. This was her way of mocking America's obsession with money and fame. She painted it while Diego was working on his controversial mural at Rockefeller Center. By the 1940s, the FBI was watching Frida closely. She and Diego supported Spanish Civil War refugees and publicly sided with the anti-Franco side. Their house became a center for left-wing thinkers and translators. Trotsky even lived there from 1937 to 1940. After someone tried to kill Trotsky in May 1940, the FBI suspected Diego himself. Their house was no longer just a home. It was part of a political network. Frida wasn't just an artist. She was part of something much bigger. In her final months, she started to feel the end was near. Just days before she died, she gave Diego their anniversary ring early and told him, "Because I feel I am going to leave you very soon." That was supposed to be a gift for August 21st, but she gave it in early July. 6 days before her death, she got up to paint again and wrote "Viva la Vida" across a slice of watermelon. Her last diary entry said, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." She had plans to promote indigenous artists through exhibitions, but her failing health and her missing leg made that impossible. She died on July 13, 1954, at 6 in the morning. She was 47. Her nurse found her in bed at Casa Azul. The cause was listed as pulmonary embolism, but no autopsy was done. That raised questions. Her nurse said she had taken 11 Demerol pills that night when she was only allowed 7. She had already given Diego the anniversary ring more than a month early. Her body was cremated quickly. Some even wondered if Diego helped her die, but no proof ever came. With her pain, drug use, and final diary entries, many believe it was suicide. Her funeral was held at the Palacio de Bellas Artes. More than 600 people came. As they mourned, one of Frida's students pulled off the Mexican flag on her coffin and replaced it with a red communist flag. It had the hammer and sickle. The crowd gasped. The ceremony almost got shut down. Diego hadn't planned for that. But it matched everything Frida believed in. She had pictures of Marx, Lenin, and Engels in her room. Her death didn't soften her message. It made it louder. In 1957, Diego turned their home into a museum. It opened in July 1958. Her ashes are still there in a frog-shaped urn on her bedside table. For years, not many people came. Then, in the 1990s, everything changed. People saw her pain and her colors and her rage. In 1995, her personal diary was published. It shocked everyone. The drawings showed pain, blood, love, drugs, and death. It was raw and real. People finally saw who Frida really was, not just the woman with flowers in her hair, but the one who suffered, loved fiercely, painted through agony, and never stopped fighting.